getting enough calcium is one thing, but where you get it from is a completely different story. Now, in the last video, we looked at calcium and how it would potentially have a protective effect against colorectal cancer. In this video, I want to talk to you about the different sources of calcium and some of the potential drawbacks and some of the positives from each individual source and how you can incorporate them into your diet if you're managing IBD. Now, for those new to the page and the channel, my name's Seb. I'm a qualified PT and nutrition coach, and I live with Crohn's disease. And I help people with this disease navigate their diet to a place of better food freedom. Now, the first source of calcium that I want to talk to you about is the big one. It's dairy milk. So this is the thing we grew up with. We had it in our cereal. We have it in our tea, in our coffee. It's everywhere. And it's the thing that as you're growing up as a child actually helps you to develop. It's got high amounts of protein, iodine and B vitamins, lots of calcium. So big, strong bones as we're taught. But there's some potential drawbacks as we get older as well. As we get older, milk becomes harder to digest. The reason for this is that we stop producing as much of the enzyme lactase that is needed in order to help us digest lactose. So as we get older, more and more people do suffer from lactose intolerance. So milk can become one of those things that if you start to not be able to tolerate it, it can do you more harm than good. Higher fat versions of milk also come with higher levels of saturated fat as well. So as we've discussed in the last video, saturated fat is one of those things that can cause more harm in the gut. So ideally, we want to be a bit more conservative with saturated fat. Now, what we can do is there's two types of protein in the dairy world, A1 and A2. Now, A2 predominantly comes from sources like goats and sheep, and also Jersey cows. Now, A2 tends to be a much easier protein to digest, and it tends to be less inflammatory. So if you are going to go down the milk route, I would definitely recommend trying A2 protein sources if you have been struggling with digesting normal cow's milk. Now, the next one I want to talk about is fermented dairy. So in particular, kefir. Now, kefir can be really good for the gut. It tends to have lower amounts of lactose. It contains more probiotics. So these are the microbes that help to populate our microbiome. And there are some studies suggesting that they can even reach down into the colon as well. So kefir can be a really good addition to helping your microbiome and repopulating it with the right bacteria. It's also protein rich as well. Now, the one thing we do want to be careful with kefir is you can get flavored versions as well that contain quite a lot of additional refined sugar. The refined sugar is obviously something we want to avoid where possible because too much of it can lead to dysbiosis, and dysbiosis is obviously what starts to cause us symptoms as well. So being cautious around yogurts with high sugar is definitely worth paying attention to, but general standard kefir with a bit of a bitter taste is a great addition. Now, the next one I want to talk about is hard aged cheeses. Now, this can be things like Parmesan, and generally Parmesan has much lower lactose because the fermentation process tends to break it down. Quite calorie dense as well, which can be important in IBD if we're struggling to put on weight and we're struggling to get the amount of calories that we need to. It's high in calcium, but we also need to be wary as well that it's also high in salt. Salt is added to the cheese to help the fermentation process, and essentially it helps draw out moisture. But salt is one of those things that, again, we want to be careful with. We don't want to overdo salt. So aged cheeses can be a great option, just don't overdo it. Now, the next one is fortified plant milk. So for any vegans out there, this can be a great addition to your diet if you're trying to get more calcium in your diet. They often come with increased B vitamins, things like vitamin D as well. And generally, if it's a decent brand, the calcium is usually added for extra fortification. They also tend to be lower in saturated fat as well. The only thing we need to be cautious with plant milks is that depending on the brand, they can come with emulsifiers and preservatives and stuff that we don't really want in. Some of them do come with gums. Not all gums are bad, so it's worth having a look at that. But if it's coming with, additional emulsifiers and things like that, then that milk's probably going to do more harm than good. I tend to look at some really basic plain plant milks that have the added vitamins and are fortified, but generally don't come with the extra emulsifiers and things like that. So plant-based milks are a great option if you're vegan and you're trying to increase your calcium intake. Now, the next one, leafy greens, things like Kale and spinach are often cited for their high calcium content, and as well as that, you're getting polyphenols, you're getting fibre and stuff like that as well. But the caveat with leafy greens is that they can be quite difficult to digest for people with IBD. Now, for me and a lot of the people that I know with this condition, spinach tends to be one of the preferred sources. You've obviously got the option of having it raw, or you can cook it down where it's more wilted. Now, I've seen people deal with cooked spinach and raw spinach equally well. It tends to be a preference, but spinach is probably the one I would recommend. Kale, although it's a great source of calcium, can be quite difficult to digest, and for me personally it is one that I tend to avoid. So leafy greens are a great source, but again, it could be quite difficult to navigate this. So try with spinach and then just basically go from there and see what works for you. And then lastly, we have calcium supplements. Now, calcium supplements are never going to be preferred to the sources of calcium that I've already given above, but they do have their place, and particularly for anyone suffering with something like osteoporosis, calcium supplements can be used to really just increase that calcium content and mitigate the effects of osteoporosis. So there is a place for calcium supplements on this list, but I think unless you're being advised by a healthcare professional with regards to something like osteoporosis, it's always better to try and aim for the whole food sources where you can. So as we can see, calcium isn't just a level playing field. There's a lot of nuance with it, and depending on what source of calcium you tend to go to the most, it's going to come with potential drawbacks and potential benefits. One thing we do need to note is that because a lot of these calcium sources from animal products do contain saturated fat, as well as being, potentially implicated in colorectal cancer risk, is also known to raise LDL if we consume too much of it. So just being aware of how much saturated fat you're taking in is quite important. And if you're trying to balance your calcium sources, it's worth getting a mix of animal products if you like to choose them, but also leafy greens, the plant milks, and things like the fermented dairy like kefir as well. So it's worth just paying attention to all of it. But the main point in all of this is obviously calcium sources are not created equal. They all come with their individual benefits and drawbacks, and it's up to you to make your mind up as to how you want to shape your diet around them. Ultimately, I think the most important thing is whether you can tolerate something. And if you can tolerate something and it goes down well, particularly in this space of IBD, that's going to be the most important thing. Get your bloods tested, make sure you're getting your LDL and things like that measured regularly so you know the effect it's having on you. But like I say, ultimately it's going to be around what you can tolerate and what you can get down on, and essentially that's what's going to help you long term. So I hope you enjoyed the video. On the next video, I'm going to give you some insight as to how I manage my calcium and my preferred sources. And as usual, let me know in the comments below what your experience with calcium sources has been with IBD and how you tend to manage yours. I'll see you on the next one.